the vast darkness of space, where stars burn with ancient light and the Force flows through all living things, there exists a weapon unlike any other, the lightsaber, elegant, deadly, a symbol of both the Jedi's wisdom and the Sith's hunger for power. But a weapon is only as effective as the hand that wields it, and the mind that guides that hand. Over millennia, Force users developed 7 classical forms of lightsaber combat, each one a philosophy made manifest through blade work, each one a testament to different approaches to conflict and resolution. Among these 7 forms, one stands apart for its raw, uncompromising power. Form 5, the Way of the Krayt Dragon, the Perseverance form, a combat style that transforms defense into overwhelming offense, that channels strength through controlled aggression, that demands both physical might and unwavering conviction. This is the form that would define one of the galaxy's most feared warriors. This is the combat style of Darth Vader. When you think of Vader, what images come to mind? Perhaps the crimson blade cutting through the darkness of a Star Destroyer corridor. The massive figure, black armor gleaming, advancing with deliberate, inexorable steps. The mechanical breathing that precedes his arrival, each breath a promise of doom. The one-handed lightsaber technique, deceptively casual, yet devastatingly effective. All of this stems from his mastery of Form V, a style he perfected first as Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, and later adapted as the Dark Lord of the Sith. But Form V's story begins long before Anakin's time, long before the Clone Wars, before the fall of the Republic, before the rise of the Empire. It begins with a problem. A fundamental question that Jedi Masters ask themselves as they watch their students train. How do we create an opening against our opponents, instead of waiting for one to appear? The foundations of power, understanding Form V's place. To understand Form V, we must first understand what came before it. The 7 classical forms of lightsaber combat didn't emerge fully formed from the minds of ancient Jedi Masters. They evolved, each one a response to the limitations of its predecessors, each one an attempt to address new threats and challenges facing the Jedi Order. Form I, Shi-Cho, was the foundation. Simple, direct, focused on basic strikes and parries. It served well in the early days of the Jedi, but as lightsaber to lightsaber combat became more common, its limitations became apparent. Form 2, Makashi, answered this with elegant precision, perfect for dueling but vulnerable against blaster fire. Form the 3rd, Soresu, became the ultimate defensive style, capable of withstanding barrages of blaster bolts and waiting out even the most aggressive opponent. Form 4, Ataru, took a different approach entirely, emphasizing acrobatic movement and force-assisted strikes to overwhelm foes quickly. Each form had its place. Each form had its adherents. But by the time of the Great Sith War, around 4,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, a new need had emerged. Some Jedi Masters, particularly those who had mastered Form 3's defensive techniques, began to see a critical flaw in their training. Soresu was nearly unbeatable defensively, yes. A true master of Form 3 could stand against a dozen blaster-wielding opponents for hours, their blade weaving an impenetrable shield of plasma. But therein lay the problem. Hours. Battle is not just about survival. It's about resolution, victory. A Jedi who can defend indefinitely but never create an opportunity to end the conflict is trapped in an endless stalemate. Worse, prolonged combat increases the risk of exhaustion, of making a single mistake that could prove fatal. The Jedi needed something more, something that retained Soresu's defensive foundations, but added the capacity to seize control of a battle, to dictate terms rather than simply react to them. Form 5 was born from this necessity. The masters who developed it understood something fundamental about combat. The best defense is not passive resistance, but active control. Why simply block an attack when you can block it and immediately counterattack? Why deflect a blaster bolt harmlessly away when you can send it directly back at the shooter? Why wait for an opening when you can create one with overwhelming force? This philosophy became the heart of Form 5 power, dominance, perseverance. Not the wild, uncontrolled aggression of an untrained fighter, but focused, purposeful force, applied at precisely the right moment. It was control married to strength, patience wedded to decisive action, and it proved devastatingly effective. The form's alternative name, the Way of the Krayt Dragon, speaks volumes about its nature. The Krayt Dragon is one of Tatooine's most fearsome predators, a massive beast that can grow to tremendous size, with armored hide thick enough to deflect blaster fire. These creatures are patient hunters, capable of lying in wait for hours or even days. But when they strike, they do so with overwhelming force, their powerful jaws and claws making short work of even armored prey. They are creatures of both patience and explosive violence, much like Form V itself. The third name, the Perseverance form, speaks to another key aspect. Form V practitioners don't give up. They don't yield. They endure their opponent's attacks, yes, but only long enough to find the perfect moment to strike back. This perseverance isn't passive endurance. It's active, aggressive determination. The Form V practitioner stands firm not because they lack the strength to attack, but because they're choosing the perfect moment to unleash that strength. Form V diverged into two distinct but related variants, each addressing different tactical situations. Shien, the classical variant, appeared first. It focused primarily on defending against and redirecting blaster fire, perfect for the battlefield scenarios that Jedi increasingly found themselves in. Djem So, developed some centuries later, specialized in lightsaber to lightsaber combat, providing powerful techniques for overwhelming another blade wielder. Most true masters of Form V learned both variants, able to seamlessly transition between them as the situation demanded. But before we delve into the specific techniques and applications of each variant, we need to understand why Form V remained controversial within the Jedi Order throughout its existence. Not all Jedi embraced this style. Some viewed it with suspicion, even concern. To understand why, we need to look at the philosophy behind the form and what it revealed about the practitioner's relationship with the Force. Birth in necessity. The origins and philosophy of Form. The Jedi Code speaks of peace, of knowledge, of serenity. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. For millennia, Jedi training emphasized emotional control through suppression, channeling the Force through calm detachment, approaching combat as a last resort undertaken with regret rather than eagerness. Form V challenged these assumptions. It didn't reject them entirely, mind you. Form V wasn't a dark side technique, but it existed in a gray area that made many traditional Jedi masters uncomfortable. The form required its practitioners to engage with their emotions, particularly their aggression, their competitive drive, their desire to win, not to suppress these feelings, but to acknowledge them, harness them, and channel them into purposeful action. This was dangerous ground. The line between controlled aggression and uncontrolled rage can be thin. The line between confidence and arrogance, between strength and brutality, between victory and domination. The Sith had shown repeatedly how easily passion could corrupt, how the desire for power could consume even the most well-intentioned Force user. Many Jedi Masters looked at Form V's emphasis on aggressive counterattacks and saw the first steps down that dark path. Yet others argued that this was precisely what made Form V valuable. Form 7, Juyo, required practitioners to channel their inner darkness, to dance on the edge of the abyss, That form was considered so dangerous that it was effectively forbidden for most of the Jedi Order's history. Form 5, by contrast, didn't require darkness. It required strength, yes. Competitive drive, certainly. A willingness to decisively end conflicts, absolutely. But these weren't inherently dark qualities. They were natural aspects of any warrior's psychology, and Form 5 provided a framework for expressing them while remaining true to Jedi principles. The philosophical debate about Form 5 often centered on the concept of domination. Form of 3 practitioners sought to outlast their opponents. Form of 4 practitioners sought to outmaneuver them. Form 5 practitioners sought to overpower them. Critics argued that this mindset of overpowering and dominating another being was fundamentally at odds with Jedi teachings about respecting all life and avoiding attachment to victory. Defenders countered that there was a vast difference between seeking to dominate for power's sake and seeking to decisively end a threat to protect the innocent. This debate never truly resolved itself. Throughout Form V's history, from its creation before the Great Sith War to its use during the Clone Wars and beyond, different Jedi reached different conclusions about its appropriateness. Some, like Sin Dralig, who became the Jedi Temple's combat instructor, saw it as an essential tool in a Jedi's arsenal. Others remained skeptical, preferring forms that felt more aligned with traditional Jedi philosophy. The development of Form V's 2 variants reflects this complexity. Shien, the classical variant, emerged first and faced less philosophical resistance. Why? Because its primary purpose was defending against blaster fire, and few could argue with the logic of turning an enemy's attacks back against them. A Jedi surrounded by battle droids, deflecting their bolts back to disable them, seemed perfectly in line with Jedi principles. It was self-defense that happened to be highly effective. Djem So, however, generated more controversy. This variant was developed specifically for lightsaber dueling, for blade-to-blade combat against other Force users. Its techniques emphasized overwhelming an opponent with powerful strikes, breaking through their defenses with superior force. To some Jedi Masters, this seemed less like self-defense and more like seeking victory through domination. The fact that many Sith Lords also favored variations of Form 5 didn't help its reputation among traditionalists. The timing of Form V's development is significant. It emerged sometime before the Great Sith War, which began in 3996 BBY. This was a turbulent period in galactic history. The Sith were on the rise. Conflicts between Force users were becoming more common. The Jedi Order found itself increasingly called upon, not just to serve as peacekeepers and mediators, but as warriors defending the Republic against existential threats. In this context, Form V's development wasn't just logical, it was necessary. The form continued to evolve over the following millennia. During the Jedi Civil War, Form 5 practitioners helped defend the Republic against the Sith Empire. During the New Sith Wars, the form was studied and practiced by both Jedi and Sith, each side recognizing its effectiveness. By the time of the Clone Wars, Form 5 had become one of the most widely practiced forms in the Jedi Order, though still not as common as the more conservative Form 3 or the balanced Form 6. Throughout this evolution, certain principles remained constant. First, Form 5 required significant physical strength and stamina. Unlike the more energy-efficient Form 3 or the Force-assisted acrobatics of Form 4, Form 5 relied heavily on the practitioner's own physical power, though the Force could certainly augment this. Large, powerful Jedi often gravitated toward Form 5 naturally, finding that it played to their inherent strengths. Second, Form 5 demanded mental fortitude. The split-second decision to transition from defense to offense, the judgment required to recognize the perfect moment to strike, the confidence needed to commit fully to a powerful attack. All of these required a practitioner to be completely present and aware. Hesitation could be fatal. Overcommitment could leave openings. Form V required its users to walk a knife's edge between caution and aggression. Third, Form V emphasized conditioning and preparation, the powerful strikes characteristic of Djem. So required extensive physical training to execute properly without leaving oneself vulnerable. The rapid transitions of Shien between deflecting blaster fire and closing with opponents demanded both cardiovascular endurance and explosive power. Form V practitioners spent countless hours conditioning their bodies to meet these demands. Finally, Form V required emotional maturity. This was perhaps the most critical factor and the reason why not every Jedi could master the form. The ability to engage one's competitive nature and aggressive impulses without being consumed by them required significant self-awareness and discipline. Young Padawans were rarely taught Form V as their primary style for precisely this reason. It was typically introduced later in training, once a Jedi had developed the emotional control necessary to wield its power responsibly. The masters who created Form 5 understood all of this. They weren't trying to turn Jedi into Sith. They were trying to create a combat style that acknowledged reality. Sometimes, the best way to protect the innocent and uphold justice is to decisively defeat those who threaten them. Sometimes, the most compassionate course of action is to end a conflict quickly and definitively, rather than let it drag on. Sometimes, strength exercised with wisdom serves the light better than passive resistance. These principles would be tested repeatedly throughout Form V's history, and nowhere would they be tested more dramatically than in the hands of Anakin Skywalker, a young man whose natural affinity for Form 5 would prove both his greatest asset and ultimately contribute to his fall to the dark side. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before we can understand what made Anakin's mastery of Form 5 so remarkable, we need to understand the form itself in all its technical detail. Shien, the classical variant against the storm picture. A battlefield. Blaster fire fills the air like crimson rain. Dozens of battle droids advance in formation, their weapons spitting bolts of plasma in coordinated volleys. Most beings would seek cover, would retreat, would find any way to avoid that storm of death. A Jedi stands firm, lightsaber ignited, blade a blur of motion. Bolts that should have found their mark instead ricochet away. Some scatter harmlessly into the air. Others streak back toward their origins, and droids collapse, disabled by their own fire. This is Shien. The classical variant of Form V, Shien was developed first, emerging from the recognition that blaster technology had fundamentally changed the nature of combat in the galaxy. In the early days of the Jedi Order, lightsaber to lightsaber combat was rare. Most conflicts involved deflecting blaster fire while closing with opponents or using the Force to resolve situations without violence. Form 3, Sora Su, had evolved as the ultimate answer to this reality, providing techniques to deflect blaster fire indefinitely. But Sora Su had a limitation. Its defensive focus meant that while a practitioner could stand against a dozen blaster-wielding opponents for hours, they struggled to actually defeat those opponents. The form lacked offensive capacity. It was all defense, all patience, all waiting. Shien's creators asked a simple question. What if we could take Sora Su's defensive capabilities and add an offensive edge? The answer transformed defensive blade work into a weapon in itself. Shien's fundamental innovation was the concept of redirected offense. Instead of simply blocking or deflecting incoming blaster fire, Shien practitioners learned to precisely control where deflected bolts went. This required incredible focus and timing. A blaster bolt travels at tremendous speed. To not just intercept it, but redirect it back at its source, requires the practitioner to calculate angles, compensate for movement, and execute with perfect precision, all in a fraction of a second. This is where the Force becomes essential. Shien users develop an almost precognitive sense of incoming fire. They don't react to where the bolt is, they anticipate where it will be. Their blade moves to intercept not through conscious thought, but through letting the Force guide their movements. This allows them to not just deflect, but redirect with devastating accuracy. An expert Shien practitioner facing a squad of battle droids doesn't need to close distance and engage each one individually. They turn the droid's own fire against them, and within moments, the entire squad lies disabled. This ability to turn an enemy's attacks back against them proved revolutionary. Suddenly, Jedi could face numerically superior forces with confidence. What should have been suicide missions, walking into a barrage of blaster fire, became tactically viable. A single Jedi using Shien could hold a corridor against dozens of enemies, each enemy's attack potentially becoming the weapon that defeated them. The psychological impact alone was significant. Soldiers hesitated to fire at Jedi, knowing their shots might be their own doom. The physical techniques of Shien differ from other forms in several key aspects. The opening stance is distinctive, with the lightsaber hilt held with both hands above the head, blade angled backward and downward at roughly 45 degrees. This stance provides maximum flexibility for rapid movements in any direction, while keeping the blade positioned to intercept incoming fire from multiple angles. The dominant leg is positioned slightly back, allowing for powerful step-through strikes when an opening presents itself. Footwork in Shien emphasizes stability and readiness. Unlike the constant motion of Form 4 or the minimal movement of Form 3, Shien practitioners maintain a balanced stance that allows them to hold their ground while processing multiple threats. They don't dance around the battlefield. They anchor themselves and create a zone of control. Anything that enters their range becomes subject to their blade. This stability proves essential when facing multiple opponents, as it prevents the practitioner from being flanked or overwhelmed by coordinated fire. One of Shien's signature techniques is the barrier of blades. This maneuver creates an impenetrable defensive screen through rapid sweeping movements of the lightsaber. The blade traces complex patterns through the air, each arc positioned to intercept incoming fire. To an outside observer, it appears as though the practitioner is surrounded by a luminous shield, bolts striking against it and deflecting away. The key to the barrier of blades is economy of motion. Every sweep must be precise, efficient, with no wasted energy. A single miscalculation leaves an opening for a bolt to penetrate. Executing the barrier of blades requires intense concentration and physical conditioning. The rapid movements strain the arms and shoulders. Maintaining the technique for extended periods demands cardiovascular endurance, but for a trained Shien practitioner, the barrier can be maintained as long as necessary. Historical accounts from the Clone Wars describe Jedi holding the barrier for hours during extended sieges, their blades never faltering, never slowing, an impenetrable bulwark against thousands of enemy shots. The second key Shien technique is Shien deflection, which combines defense with offense in a single fluid motion. The practitioner deflects an incoming shot, while simultaneously launching themselves toward an opponent. This requires perfect timing. The deflection must happen at precisely the moment that allows the practitioner to use the momentum of their movement to close distance rapidly. Done correctly, Shien deflection allows a Jedi to deflect fire from multiple opponents while advancing into melee range, where their lightsaber provides overwhelming advantage. Shien deflection showcases the form's core philosophy. Defense is not an end in itself. It's a means to create offensive opportunities. Every block, every deflection, every defensive move is simultaneously setting up an attack. This mental shift from thinking defensively to thinking offensively while defending defines the Shien mindset. The practitioner is never purely defending. They're always attacking, even when it appears they're on the defensive. The reverse grip technique deserves special attention. While not mandatory for Shien, many practitioners adopted this unconventional approach to holding their lightsaber. In a reverse grip, the thumb and index finger are closest to the pommel, with the blade extending back along the forearm when the hand is held naturally. This grip provides several advantages for Shien techniques. It enhances the speed of certain defensive movements, allows for unique angles of deflection, and creates unexpected attack vectors that can surprise opponents familiar with standard grip techniques. However, the reverse grip also has significant drawbacks. It limits reach slightly and makes certain defensive positions more difficult to achieve. It requires extensive training to use effectively, as the natural leverage and angles differ from standard grip. For these reasons, even among Shien practitioners, the reverse grip remained relatively uncommon. Those who mastered it, however, gained a significant advantage through its unpredictability. Ahsoka Tano, Padawan to Anakin Skywalker, became one of the most notable practitioners of the reverse Shien grip. Her adoption of the technique suited her dual-wielding style and smaller stature. By holding one of her lightsabers in reverse grip, while maintaining a standard grip on the other, she created a defensive style that could handle threats from virtually any angle. Her ability to transition between deflecting blaster fire and engaging multiple opponents in close combat made her remarkably effective on the battlefield despite her youth. Shien's effectiveness against multiple opponents and blaster-wielding enemies made it incredibly popular among Jedi, who regularly saw combat. During the Clone Wars, as Jedi found themselves leading clone troops against droid armies, Shien techniques became essential. A Jedi could use the barrier of blades to protect their troops from incoming fire while advancing, then employ Shien deflection to close with enemy positions, using the enemy's own fire against them throughout the engagement. Yet Shien had clear weaknesses that its creators recognized from the beginning. The form's strength against multiple opponents became a liability against single, highly skilled opponents. The wide, sweeping movements necessary for the barrier of blades left openings that an expert duelist could exploit. The emphasis on deflecting projectiles rather than blade-to-blade combat meant Shien practitioners sometimes struggled against opponents wielding lightsabers, particularly those using refined dueling forms like Makashi. Additionally, Shien's effectiveness diminished if the practitioner was forced to move rapidly or engage in highly mobile combat. The stable stance that provided such excellent defensive coverage became a hindrance if tactical circumstances required rapid repositioning. An opponent who could force a Shien user to constantly relocate could effectively neutralize many of the form's advantages. These limitations weren't fatal flaws, they were simply tactical considerations. Shien was designed for specific situations, and in those situations, it was devastatingly effective. A Jedi facing overwhelming numbers of blaster-wielding opponents found no better form. But against a single, skilled lightsaber duelist, other forms might serve better. This recognition led to the development of Djem So. Before Djem So's creation, Jedi who favored Form V's philosophy had to train in additional forms to cover Shien's weaknesses. They might use Shien against groups and blasters, but switch to Makashi's dueling techniques, or Ataru's aggressive offense when facing another lightsaber wielder. While effective, this approach required mastering multiple forms, something not every Jedi could achieve. The need for a variant of Form 5 that addressed lightsaber combat led to one of the most powerful and controversial developments in Jedi martial training. Djem So, the duelist's answer to all opposition. Where Shien deflects a storm of blaster fire with systematic precision, Djem So breaks opponents like waves against cliffs. Where Shien uses an enemy's attack as the weapon that defeats them, Djem So uses an enemy's attack as the opening that dooms them. This is the distinction between Form V's two variants. Both share the same philosophical foundation, the same emphasis on powerful counterattacks, the same commitment to creating openings rather than waiting for them. But their tactical applications diverge dramatically. Djem So developed centuries after Shien, emerging from the same group that had originally created the classical variant. These were Form 3 masters, who had sought to add offensive capability to Soresu's defense. Shien had succeeded brilliantly against the primary threat they faced, ranged weapons wielded by non-force sensitive opponents. But what about the other primary threat, the one that had driven the development of Form 2 centuries earlier? What about dueling against other lightsaber wielders? The masters studied the problem. Shien's techniques proved less effective against a skilled opponent with a lightsaber. The wide sweeps designed to intercept multiple blaster bolts created openings for a focused, precise blade. The stable stance that anchored against multiple opponents lacked the mobility needed against an agile duelist. They needed something new, something that retained Form V's core philosophy while addressing these specific challenges. Djem So was the answer. The variant maintained everything that made Form V effective. The emphasis on powerful counterattacks, the philosophy of dominating rather than outlasting opponents, the commitment to ending conflicts decisively, but it adapted these principles specifically for blade-to-blade combat. Where Shien's techniques were designed around processing multiple simultaneous threats, Djem So's techniques focused on overwhelming a single opponent through superior force and precision. The Djem So opening stance differs from Shien's, though both emphasize power and stability. A Djem So practitioner stands with feet shoulder-width apart, one foot slightly forward to provide a stable base for powerful strikes. The lightsaber is held overhead, angled back and down at approximately 45 degrees. This positioning allows for devastating overhead strikes while maintaining defensive coverage. From this stance, the practitioner can transition instantly between defense and offense, can block an incoming strike, and immediately follow with a counterattack that uses the opponent's momentum against them. This transitional capability defines Djem So. The form's signature move, the fluid riposte, exemplifies this perfectly. When an opponent attacks, the Djem So practitioner doesn't simply block or parry. They perform what appears to be a defensive move, but is actually the first part of a counterattack. The block redirects the opponent's blade while simultaneously setting up an immediate, powerful counterstrike. Done correctly, the fluid riposte flows seamlessly from defense to offense, giving the opponent no time to recover, no opportunity to reset their guard. The mechanics of the fluid riposte require exquisite timing and control. The defensive component must be solid enough to fully stop the opponent's attack, preventing any possibility of their blade slipping through. But it must also be executed in a way that positions the practitioner's blade perfectly for the counterattack. This often means not just blocking, but actively redirecting the opponent's weapon, using their momentum against them. A properly executed fluid riposte makes the opponent's own attack the thing that creates the opening for their defeat. Strength plays a crucial role in Djem So's effectiveness. Unlike forms that emphasize speed, precision, or efficiency, Djem So openly embraces power. Its strikes are heavy, designed not to slip through defenses but to smash through them. A Djem So practitioner facing an opponent using lighter, faster forms, like Makashi or Ataru, doesn't try to match their speed or precision. Instead, they wait for an opening, then deliver a strike with such force that the opponent's defensive position crumbles. This is where the force becomes essential. Pure physical strength, while important, isn't enough for the most devastating Djem So techniques. Practitioners augment their strikes with the force, channeling energy through their muscles, adding momentum and impact beyond what biology alone could provide. The result is strikes that can shatter durasteel, that can overpower even the strongest defensive positions, that make every successful connection potentially fight-ending. The falling avalanche represents the ultimate expression of this philosophy. This technique is Djem So's most iconic and devastating maneuver. The practitioner raises their lightsaber high overhead, often with both hands gripping the hilt for maximum leverage and control. They channel the force through their body, augmenting their strength. Then they bring the blade down in a powerful overhead strike, like an avalanche cascading down a mountain. The blow is unstoppable, overwhelming, designed to break through even the most resilient defenses. Executing the falling avalanche successfully requires several factors to align. First, timing. The move leaves the practitioner exposed during its execution. If initiated at the wrong moment, an agile opponent can dodge or counter. Second, power. The strike must be delivered with sufficient force to achieve its purpose. A half-hearted falling avalanche is merely a high strike, easily defended. Third, commitment. The practitioner must fully commit to the technique. Hesitation ruins it. Once initiated, the falling avalanche must be carried through to completion. The psychological impact of the falling avalanche cannot be overstated. Opponents facing it feel the weight of the force itself bearing down on them. The technique radiates threat, demands respect, forces a response. Many opponents, faced with the falling avalanche, make the fatal mistake of trying to block it head on. Their defensive position holds for a split second, then collapses under the overwhelming force, leaving them open to follow-up strikes. The smart response is evasion, but the technique's psychological pressure makes that difficult. Standing firm before an avalanche goes against every survival instinct. Against armored opponents, the falling avalanche proves particularly effective. The sheer kinetic energy of the strike translates through armor, rattling opponents even if the blade doesn't penetrate directly. The technique has been known to crack armor plates, to knock opponents off their feet purely through impact force. It's one of the few lightsaber techniques that doesn't rely primarily on the blade's cutting ability, but instead uses it as a focusing point for force-enhanced kinetic energy. Djem So's power focus creates certain requirements for its practitioners. Physical conditioning is paramount. The repeated execution of powerful strikes strains the entire body. Arms, shoulders, back, core, all must be developed to support the technique properly. This is why larger, stronger Jedi often gravitated toward Djem So. Their natural physical attributes complemented the form's requirements. However, size and strength alone don't determine success with Djem So. Proper technique matters enormously. A smaller practitioner who fully understands the biomechanics of power generation, who knows how to channel the force effectively, who has honed their timing to perfection, can execute the Djem So techniques as effectively as someone twice their size. The key is understanding that power comes not from muscles alone, but from the complete integration of body mechanics, force augmentation, and tactical timing. The footwork of Djem So emphasizes stability and powerful weight transfer. Unlike the constant motion of Form 4 or the minimal movement of Form 3, Djem So practitioners move deliberately, each step purposeful. When they do move, they move with commitment, driving forward with their entire body weight behind their strikes. This creates tremendous momentum that opponents must counter, putting them constantly on the defensive. The form's emphasis on counterattacking creates an interesting dynamic in duels. A Djem So practitioner often appears initially defensive, letting their opponent attack first. This isn't timidity or weakness, it's tactical patience. Every attack their opponent makes is an opportunity for a devastating counter. The more aggressively their opponent attacks, the more openings they create for Djem So's powerful responses. In this way, Djem So practitioners can make their opponents defeat themselves, channeling aggression back against its source. This principle extends to the form's overall strategy. A Djem So duelist seeks to control the pace and positioning of combat. They want their opponent attacking because attacks create opportunities. They want their opponent committed because commitment creates vulnerability. They manipulate their opponent into patterns of aggression, then exploit those patterns with overwhelming counterattacks. It's as much psychological warfare as physical combat. Against opponents using pure defensive forms like Soresu, Djem So provides answers. The powerful strikes probe defenses, test endurance, force the opponent to expend energy maintaining their guard. A Soresu master can defend indefinitely against lighter forms, but Djem So's heavy strikes accumulate. Each blocked blow rattles the defender, strains their arms, tests their stamina. Eventually, the defense weakens, and when it does, the Djem So practitioner capitalizes immediately. Against faster, more mobile forms like Ataru, the Djem So takes a different approach. The practitioner doesn't try to match the speed. Instead, they wait for the moment when the opponent commits to an attack, when they're in mid-leap or mid-strike and can't dodge. Then, the Djem So practitioner delivers a single, devastating blow. The entire duel becomes a waiting game, the Ataru user seeking an opening, the Djem So user waiting for the perfect moment to counter. This patience, this willingness to absorb pressure until the right moment arrives, reflects the perseverance aspect of Form V's philosophy. Djem So practitioners don't panic when facing faster opponents. They don't rush when facing defensive opponents. They persevere, maintaining their strategy, trusting in their training and the inevitable opening that every fighting style must eventually create. The form's weaknesses mirror its strengths. The emphasis on powerful strikes over speed means Djem So practitioners can struggle against extremely agile opponents who refuse to engage directly. An opponent with the discipline to continuously evade, to never commit fully to attacks, can frustrate Djem So's counterattacking approach. This is one reason why Djem So is often supplemented with elements from other forms, providing answers to these specific tactical situations. Mobility represents another weakness. The stable stance and powerful strikes that make Djem So so effective in stationary dueling become liabilities if forced to fight while moving rapidly, chasing an opponent across varied terrain while maintaining Djem So technique proves difficult. The form works best in relatively confined spaces, where both combatants must engage directly. Environmental factors can also impact Djem So's effectiveness. The powerful overhead strikes require sufficient vertical space. Low ceilings or enclosed environments might restrict these techniques. Unstable footing can undermine the stable stance the form requires. Wise, Djem So practitioners account for environmental factors when deciding whether to use the form or switch to something more appropriate for the conditions. Despite these weaknesses, Djem So's strengths made it incredibly popular among combat-focused Jedi and Sith alike. Its straightforward philosophy, clear techniques, and devastating effectiveness when properly applied attracted practitioners who valued directness over subtlety, power over finesse. More than any other lightsaber form, Djem So reflected the personality of its users. Those who favored it tended to be confident, direct, comfortable with aggression when properly channeled. This attraction went both ways. Jedi who naturally possessed these personality traits gravitated toward Djem So, finding in it a perfect expression of their approach to conflict, and the practice of Djem So reinforced these traits, teaching its practitioners to trust their strength, to act decisively, to face opposition head-on rather than seeking to avoid or outlast it. This feedback loop created some of the most formidable warriors the galaxy had ever seen, none more so than the young Padawan who would perfect Djem So beyond what its creators ever imagined. The Chosen One, Anakin Skywalker. The lightsaber forms evolved not in peaceful temples, but in the fires of conflict. Each form bears the marks of the wars that shaped it, the battles that tested it, the warriors who perfected it through desperate necessity. Form 5 is no exception. Its journey from theoretical development to battlefield doctrine spans 4,000 years of galactic history, touching every major conflict between Force users. The earliest confirmed records of Form of 5 in combat date to the Great Sith War, which erupted in 3996 BBY. This conflict saw the Jedi Order face one of its greatest challenges as rogue Jedi turned to the dark side and allied with the ancient Sith species. Among the heroes who stood against this tide was Ulic Qel-Droma, a Jedi Knight whose mastery of lightsaber combat proved instrumental in many battles. Historical records suggest Qel-Droma employed Form Phi techniques, using their aggressive counter-attacking philosophy to face down multiple dark side opponents. The Great Sith War represented exactly the type of large-scale conflict for which Form 5 had been designed. Jedi found themselves leading Republic forces against enemies wielding both lightsabers and blasters, often in situations where they faced overwhelming numerical odds. Shien's ability to handle multiple blaster-wielding opponents, while Djem So provided answers to dark-side duelists, made Form Phi practitioners particularly valuable during this period. Historical accounts from the Great Sith War describe Jedi using Form 5 to hold critical positions against vastly superior forces. One tale speaks of a Jedi Master who single-handedly defended a Republic command center against a Sith assault force. For 6 hours, the Master maintained the barrier of blades, deflecting thousands of blaster shots, while Republic forces evacuated through hidden tunnels. When Sith acolytes finally closed to melee range, the Master switched to Djem So, his blade a whirlwind of devastating counterstrikes. By the time reinforcements arrived, he stood surrounded by defeated enemies, his lightsaber still humming, his stance unbroken. Such stories, whether embellished or not, speak to Form V's effectiveness in the crucible of war. The Form's philosophy of perseverance resonated strongly with Jedi facing existential threats. When the alternative to victory is the triumph of darkness, when falling back isn't an option, when you must stand and overcome or watch everything you protect be destroyed. Form V provides both the techniques and the mindset necessary to prevail. The Jedi Civil War, which erupted around 3959 BBY, saw Form Phi employed by both sides of the conflict. When Revan and Malak fell to the dark side and waged war against the Republic, many of their Sith followers utilized Form Phi's powerful techniques. The Form's emphasis on domination aligned well with Sith philosophy, though Sith practitioners often pushed past the controlled aggression that Jedi maintained, letting anger and hatred fuel their strikes. This period highlighted a crucial truth about Form Phi. The Form itself is neutral. The same techniques that let a Jedi protect the innocent can be wielded by a Sith to terrorize and dominate. The difference lies not in the Form, but in the practitioner's intent, their connection to the Force, their understanding of why they fight. A Jedi using Djem So's falling avalanche seeks to quickly incapacitate a threat with minimal suffering. A Sith using the same technique revels in the fear it inspires, the power it demonstrates, the satisfaction of crushing opposition. The new Sith Wars, which plagued the galaxy for roughly 1,000 years, ending around 1000 BBY, proved to be Form Phi's greatest testing ground. This prolonged conflict saw the Jedi Order and various Sith factions engage in countless battles across numerous worlds. It was during this era that Form 5 achieved its fullest development, with masters on both sides pushing the boundaries of what the Form could accomplish. One figure stands out from this period: the Sith Blade Master, Qasim. Qasim operated within the Sith Brotherhood of Darkness, training acolytes in the lightsaber arts. Unlike many Sith instructors who emphasized raw power and aggressive offense, Qasim recognized that true mastery required understanding all aspects of combat. He became a renowned master of multiple forms, but Form 5 held a special place in his teachings. Qasim understood that Form V suited certain body types and temperaments better than others. Larger, stronger students found the Form's power-based approach played to their natural advantages. students with more aggressive personalities, those who chafed under the defensive patience of Form 3 or the precise control of Form 2, thrived with Form V's philosophy of controlled aggression. Qasim became renowned for his ability to identify which students would benefit most from Form V training, and for his methods of developing their potential. One of Qasim's most promising students was a man named Dessel, later known as Darth Bane. Bane possessed tremendous physical strength and an uncompromising will. Qasim recognized immediately that Bane should study Djem So. Under Qasim's instruction, Bane developed his Form V skills to an extraordinary degree. His mastery of the falling avalanche became legendary within the Sith Academy. In his hands, the technique didn't just overpower opponents, it shattered them, breaking both blade work and spirit with a single devastating strike. Bane's eventual confrontation with Qasim showcased the full potential of Djem So. When master and student finally faced each other in earnest combat, Bane employed every lesson Qasim had taught him. He used Djem So's counter-attacking philosophy, letting Qasim attack first, studying his patterns, waiting for the perfect opening. When it came, Bane's strike proved decisive. The encounter demonstrated that Form 5, when mastered completely, could overcome even multiple form masters, like Qasim. After Bane established the Sith rule of 2, Form Viti continued to be studied by successive generations of Sith lords, though the practice varied depending on each lord's preference. Some Sith favored the more aggressive Form 7, Juyo, finding its embrace of rage more aligned with their philosophy. Others preferred Form 2's elegant precision, or Form 6's balanced approach. But Form 5 never disappeared from Sith training, as its effectiveness in combat remained undeniable. Among the Jedi Order, Form V's reputation varied over the centuries. During periods of relative peace, when the Jedi served primarily as diplomats and peacekeepers, some questioned whether such an aggressive form was truly necessary. Masters worried that teaching Form 5 to young Padawans might instill attitudes contrary to Jedi philosophy. The form became less emphasized in basic training, reserved instead for those Jedi who showed both aptitude and proper temperament. However, during periods of conflict, Form V's popularity invariably surged. Pragmatism overcame philosophical concerns when Jedi found themselves facing life-or-death situations with increasing frequency. The Clone Wars represented exactly such a period. When the Separatist crisis erupted and the galaxy plunged into war, Jedi who had previously questioned Form V's place in their tradition suddenly found themselves grateful for its existence. By the era of the Clone Wars, several Jedi Masters had achieved renowned mastery of Form V Tindralig, who served as the Jedi Temple's chief lightsaber instructor, had perfected both variants. His teaching emphasized the importance of understanding when to use Shien versus Djem So, how to transition between them seamlessly, and how to integrate Form V with other forms to cover its weaknesses. Countless Jedi Knights trained under Dralig, learning Form V principles that would serve them throughout the war. Jedi Master Plo Koon, known for his wisdom and combat prowess, incorporated Form V into his fighting style. His approach blended Form V's aggressive counterattacks with force abilities, creating a distinctive combat method that proved highly effective against both battle droids and dark side opponents. Plo Koon's use of Form 5 demonstrated that the form could be wielded by practitioners who fully embodied Jedi principles of compassion and justice, dispelling concerns that the form inherently led toward darkness. Adi Gallia, another respected Jedi Master and member of the High Council, favored Form V for its effectiveness in the chaotic combat situations that increasingly characterized the war. Her mastery of Shien's defensive techniques allowed her to protect clone troopers under her command, while leading from the front, a leadership style that earned tremendous respect from the soldiers she commanded. Gallia showed that Form 5 could serve the Jedi principle of protecting others, using its power not for personal glory, but in service to those who couldn't protect themselves. Even Piel, despite his small stature, mastered Form 5 through dedication and skill. He proved that physical size mattered far less than proper technique and force augmentation. His success with the form inspired other smaller Jedi, showing them that any committed practitioner could master Form V's techniques. Even PL's combat record during the Clone Wars demonstrated that power comes not from size, but from the integration of body, mind, and force. Luminara Unduli brought her own variation to Form V, occasionally employing a horizontal grip that created unique angles for both defense and offense. Her adaptations showed that Form V, like all lightsaber forms, could be personalized, modified to fit individual style and situation, while maintaining its core principles. The most successful Form V practitioners understood this, taking the foundation the form provided and building upon it with their own innovations. Yet among all these masters, among all these skilled practitioners who wielded Form 5 with competence or even excellence, one Jedi stood apart. One Jedi took Form 5 and transformed it into an expression of power that exceeded anything the form's creators had imagined. His name was Anakin Skywalker, and his relationship with Form 5 would define both his greatest triumphs and his ultimate fall. The Chosen One's power. Anakin Skywalker's mastery. The prophecy spoke of balance, of a chosen one who would bring equilibrium to the Force. When Qui-Gon Jinn discovered a 9-year-old slave boy on Tatooine with a midi-chlorian count higher than Master Yoda, higher than any Jedi in recorded history, he believed he had found that chosen one. Anakin Skywalker entered Jedi training at an age when most Padawans had years of temple education behind them. He had none of their formal foundation, none of their structured learning, none of their early indoctrination into Jedi philosophy. What he had was raw, untamed potential, unlike anything the galaxy had seen in generations. Obi-Wan Kenobi, who reluctantly took Anakin as his Padawan after Qui-Gon's death, faced a unique challenge. How do you train someone whose natural affinity for the Force exceeds your own? How do you teach discipline to someone whose instincts are often more accurate than careful analysis? How do you instill traditional Jedi patience in someone whose entire being surges with energy, with the need to act, to do, to achieve? Obi-Wan, a master of Form 3 Soresu, attempted to teach Anakin his own defensive style. The lessons didn't take. Anakin could learn the techniques, could execute them perfectly when required, but Soresu's philosophy didn't resonate with his nature. Waiting for opponents to exhaust themselves, maintaining perfect defense for hours, trusting in patience above all else, every aspect of Soresu ran counter to Anakin's instincts. He was speed and power and barely controlled aggression, given human form. He needed a combat style that channeled these attributes rather than suppressing them. Anakin found that style in Form V, from the moment he began serious training in Djem. So, something clicked. The form's emphasis on powerful counterattacks aligned perfectly with his combat instincts. The philosophy of creating openings rather than waiting for them matched his proactive approach to problem solving. The physical demands of the form, which challenged larger students, meant nothing to someone who could augment his strength with unprecedented force power. And perhaps most importantly, Form V allowed Anakin to embrace his competitive nature, his desire to win decisively, without requiring him to suppress the very aspects of his personality that made him unique. Obi-Wan watched his Padawan's development with mixed feelings. On one hand, Anakin's skill with Form V advanced at an astonishing rate. Techniques that took other students months to master, Anakin perfected in weeks. His natural understanding of timing, his precognitive sense of opponent movements, his ability to channel massive amounts of force energy through his strikes, all of this made him a Form V prodigy. On the other hand, Obi-Wan worried. He saw how Anakin threw himself into combat with an enthusiasm that sometimes bordered on eagerness. He noticed how his Padawan seemed to enjoy dueling, to take satisfaction in victory that went beyond relief at prevailing. These concerns weren't unjustified, but neither did they represent anything inherently dark. Anakin loved flying, loved building things, loved helping people, and yes, he loved the challenge of combat. He was passionate about everything he did, unable to approach any task half-heartedly. This intensity, properly channeled, made him an extraordinary Jedi. Improperly channeled, it could lead him down dark paths. Form V became both the tool that showcased his brilliance and the lens through which his internal conflicts manifested. The Battle of Geonosis, which marked the beginning of the Clone Wars, provided Anakin's first serious test against a truly powerful opponent, Count Dooku. The engagement revealed both Anakin's potential and his limitations. When Dooku initially engaged Anakin, the young Padawan attempted to use Form V's aggressive counterattacking to overwhelm the Count. But Dooku, a master of Form 2 Makashi, had spent decades perfecting dueling techniques. He had fought some of the greatest bladesmen of his generation, and Anakin, for all his raw power and natural talent, lacked experience. Dooku parried Anakin's powerful gem, So strikes with minimal effort, his precise blade work exploiting the small openings that Anakin's aggressive technique created. When Anakin, frustrated, switched to a two-lightsaber Jarkai approach, Dooku adapted immediately, disarming the young Jedi and then maiming him, severing his right arm. The defeat was devastating, both physically and psychologically. Anakin had believed his power and passion would be enough to triumph. Geonosis taught him otherwise. But Anakin learned. Throughout the Clone Wars, he refined his Form V technique, adding precision to power, tactical thinking to instinct, discipline to aggression. He studied recordings of his battles, analyzing his mistakes, identifying patterns in his opponent's responses to his techniques. He sparred constantly with Jedi Masters, with clone commandos, with anyone who could offer him the experience he needed to transform raw talent into true mastery. The war itself accelerated his development. Unlike Jedi of previous generations who might engage in a handful of lightsaber duels during their entire career, Anakin faced combat situations almost daily. Battle droids by the thousands, dark Jedi serving the separatist cause, bounty hunters and assassins. Each engagement added to his experience, refined his instincts, polished his technique. Form 5 was a battlefield form, and Anakin perfected it on the battlefield. His mastery of Shien proved particularly valuable when leading clone troopers. Anakin developed an almost supernatural ability to process multiple simultaneous threats. In the midst of a firefight, with bolts coming from dozens of directions, he could maintain the barrier of blades while simultaneously directing his troops, coordinating tactics through the chaos of combat. Clone troopers under his command learned that staying close to General Skywalker meant protection. His lightsaber became a shield for his entire squad, deflecting fire that would have otherwise found its mark in clone armor. But it was Djem So where Anakin truly transcended. He took the falling avalanche, already one of the most powerful techniques in lightsaber combat, and pushed it to levels previous masters had never imagined. When Anakin executed the falling avalanche, he channeled force energy so intense that opponents reported feeling the air itself compress, feeling pressure building like a physical weight. His blade descended with such force that it could shatter defensive positions, buckle armor, drive opponents to their knees from the sheer kinetic impact. The fluid riposte became Anakin's signature move. His timing proved so precise, his reflexes so perfect, that he could turn any opponent's attack into their defeat. Masters would watch recordings of his duels and struggle to identify the exact moment when defense became offense. The transitions flowed so smoothly, so naturally, that they appeared not as separate techniques, but as continuous motion, a single dance where every defensive move set up an attack, and every attack created the setup for the next defense. His rematch with Count Dooku, 3 years after their initial confrontation, showcased just how far Anakin had come. Aboard the separatist flagship Invisible Hand, With Chancellor Palpatine's life hanging in the balance, Anakin faced Dooku again. This time, things went very differently. Anakin opened with a Shien stance, which Dooku recognized immediately. The Count prepared to counter Shien's wide movements with Makashi's precise strikes. Then Anakin incorporated Ataru's acrobatic elements, forcing Dooku to adjust. The Count adapted, falling into familiar patterns, seeking to lure Anakin into overextending. But Anakin wasn't the impulsive Padawan anymore. He had become patient, tactical, willing to let Dooku think he had the upper hand. When Dooku committed to what should have been a finishing combination, Anakin shifted entirely to pure Djem So. The powerful counterstrikes came faster than Dooku could adjust, each one delivered with devastating force. The Count's elegant Makashi technique, which had served him flawlessly for decades, couldn't generate sufficient power to contest Anakin's strikes. Their blades met again and again, and each time Dooku found himself pushed back, his defensive position eroding. The end came when Anakin executed a perfect fluid riposte, catching Dooku's blade, redirecting it with overwhelming force, and following through with a series of strikes so rapid and powerful that the Count could barely react. Within moments, Dooku was disarmed, his lightsaber flying from his grasp. He knelt, defeated, before the young Jedi he had once dismissed. Anakin's victory proved total, but it also revealed the danger that had always lurked within Anakin's relationship with Form V. The falling avalanche technique in particular required significant Force energy. Channeling that energy meant drawing deeply on the Force, opening oneself completely to its flow. For most Jedi, this meant connecting to the light, feeling the life energy of the living Force, drawing strength from peace and harmony. For Anakin, fighting to save Palpatine, driven by fear of what would happen if he failed, that connection tapped into something darker. The rage he felt at Dooku for all the clone troopers killed under the Count's command. The anger at being helpless 3 years ago. The fear of losing another mentor figure. All of these emotions surged through him as he drew on the Force, and Form V, with its acceptance of aggressive instincts, channeled them into his combat technique. When Palpatine encouraged him to kill the defeated Dooku, those dark emotions made the decision easy. It wasn't the Jedi way, but in that moment, with adrenaline and dark emotions coursing through him, Anakin didn't care about the Jedi way. This incident highlighted what some Jedi Masters had always feared about Form V. The line between controlled aggression and uncontrolled rage could become dangerously thin. A practitioner drawing on angry emotions to fuel their strikes was already halfway to the dark side, even if they didn't realize it. And for someone with Anakin's power, with his emotional intensity, with his tendency to act first and question later, that line became even more precarious. Yet even after killing Dooku, even after that transgression, Anakin remained a hero of the Republic. His mastery of Form 5 saved countless lives throughout the war. His ability to lead from the front, to protect those under his command with his lightsaber skills, inspired loyalty among clone troopers and fellow Jedi alike. His combat effectiveness made him one of the Jedi Order's most valuable assets. If Form 5 led him to occasional excesses, well, war excused much. Or so the Jedi Council told themselves, perhaps recognizing too late that they were compromising their principles in service to victory. The truth was that Anakin Skywalker represented Form V's fullest expression, both its greatest strengths and its most dangerous weaknesses. His power, skill, and determination made him nearly unbeatable in combat. His emotional intensity, love of victory, and difficulty with patience made him vulnerable to manipulation. The same qualities that made him a devastating practitioner of Form 5 made him susceptible to Palpatine's corruption. And when he finally fell, when he became Darth Vader, his mastery of Form 5 would evolve into something even more terrifying. From hero to monster. Darth Vader's evolution of Form 5. The molten rivers of Mustafar ran red and gold. the volcanic planet's surface a hellscape of fire and ash. On a collection platform suspended over lava flows, two former brothers fought. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the master who had trained him, versus Anakin Skywalker, now calling himself Darth Vader. Their duel would end with Anakin's defeat, his body mutilated, his limbs severed, his flesh burned beyond recognition. From the lava banks, Palpatine retrieved what remained of his apprentice and encased him in the black armor that would become synonymous with terror across the galaxy. The armor saved Vader's life. It also redefined how he fought. As Anakin, he had been speed and power combined. His Form 5 technique relied on explosive movements, rapid transitions between defense and offense, aggressive footwork that kept opponents constantly reacting. The armor changed everything. Heavier than standard clothing, equipped with life support systems that added bulk, connected to his body through cybernetic interfaces that responded differently than natural nerves. The suit severely limited his mobility. The acrobatic elements he had sometimes incorporated, the swift footwork, the rapid repositioning, all of this became impossible. Another warrior might have been crippled by these limitations. Vader adapted. He couldn't move as quickly anymore, so he learned to move with perfect efficiency. Every step was purposeful, calculated, nothing wasted. He couldn't execute complex acrobatic maneuvers, so he perfected stationary technique until his blade work from a fixed position exceeded what he had achieved while mobile. His reduced speed became an asset, lending his movements a deliberate, inexorable quality that proved psychologically devastating to opponents. The cybernetics provided compensation. Vader's prosthetic limbs, while lacking the fine sensory feedback of natural flesh, offered strength beyond human norms. He could execute the falling avalanche with even more force than before, the hydraulic systems in his arms adding mechanical power to force augmentation. His grip strength exceeded what any natural hand could achieve, making disarming him virtually impossible. The armor itself could absorb impacts that would have broken bones, allowing him to trade blows in ways that would have been suicide for an unarmored duelist. But the most significant change wasn't physical, it was philosophical. As a Jedi, Anakin had practiced Form 5 within a framework of restraint. The Jedi Code emphasized using force only as necessary, ending fights quickly to minimize harm, showing mercy to defeated opponents. These principles created an upper boundary on how far he could push Form V's aggressive potential. As Vader, serving the dark side, embracing the Sith philosophy of domination, those boundaries dissolved. Form, V's core principle of overwhelming opposition through superior force, aligned perfectly with the Sith belief in power as the ultimate arbiter of truth. Vader no longer fought to protect or to defend. He fought to dominate, to terrorize, to demonstrate the futility of resistance. This shift in intent transformed how he applied Form V technique. The falling avalanche, which Anakin had used to quickly incapacitate threats, became in Vader's hands a weapon of psychological warfare. He would execute the technique with such overwhelming force that even deflecting it successfully left opponents shaken, their confidence eroded, their will to resist undermined. The fluid riposte evolved similarly. Anakin had used it to efficiently counter attacks and create openings. Vader used it to demonstrate superiority. When opponents attacked, Vader would counter with just enough force to turn their attack into a desperate defensive scramble. Then pause. Let them recover. Let them try again. Each time, his counter would be marginally more powerful, more precise, making clear that he was toying with them, that he could end the fight whenever he chose. This psychological dimension became central to Vader's combat methodology. He studied an ancient Sith technique called Dun Muk, which involved using taunts, psychological pressure, and force-based intimidation during combat. Vader integrated Dun Muk seamlessly with his Form V technique. As he fought, he would probe his opponent's minds, identifying their fears, doubts, and insecurities. Then he would use the Force to amplify those negative emotions, breaking down their mental defenses, even as his lightsaber broke down their physical ones. The combination proved devastating. Opponents facing Vader found themselves battling not just his blade, but their own minds. Fear whispered that resistance was futile. Doubt suggested that every defense would ultimately fail. Despair promised that death was inevitable. And through it all, Vader's lightsaber pressed forward with mechanical precision, his Form V technique executed with flawless efficiency, every counterattack hitting exactly where it would do maximum psychological damage. Yet Vader recognized his limitations. The armor restricted his mobility significantly. Against multiple opponents who could maintain distance and coordinate their attacks, he would be at a disadvantage. Fast, highly mobile opponents who refused to engage directly could potentially exploit his reduced speed. These tactical considerations led Vader to expand his repertoire beyond pure Form V. He studied Form 3, Sor Su, the defensive form that Obi-Wan had used to defeat him on Mustafar. This must have been difficult, learning the techniques of the form that had ended his life as Anakin Skywalker. But Vader approached it tactically. Sor Su provided defensive techniques perfectly suited to protecting his vital chest plate, which housed crucial life support systems. By integrating Sor Su's tight, efficient defensive movements with Djem So's powerful counterattacks, Vader created a hybrid style that covered many of his vulnerabilities. He also incorporated elements of Form 2, Makashi, the dueling form that Count Dooku had wielded so effectively. Makashi emphasized economy of motion, precise blade placement, and techniques specifically designed for lightsaber-to-lightsaber combat. These principles complemented Vader's new fighting style perfectly. Unable to move quickly, he needed every movement to count. Makashi taught him to make each strike serve multiple purposes, to position his blade with such precision that opponents' options continually narrowed, until they found themselves with no good choices remaining. The resulting style was uniquely Vader's. It retained Form V's core philosophy and many of its signature techniques. The falling avalanche remained his primary power strike. The fluid riposte continued to be his preferred counter, but these techniques now existed within a framework that integrated defensive solidity from Sor Su, dueling precision from Makashi, and psychological warfare from Dunmuch. Add the physical advantages of his cybernetics and the dark side power he could channel through the Force, and you had a combat style that few could withstand. His one-handed technique deserves special mention. As Anakin, he had primarily used two-handed grips for maximum power and control. Vader, by contrast, often fought one-handed, holding his lightsaber in his right hand while his left hung casually at his side. This wasn't arrogance or posturing, it was calculated intimidation. The message was clear. I don't need both hands to defeat you. I don't need my full power. What I'm showing you is sufficient to crush you, and I'm not even trying. When Vader did commit both hands to his grip, his opponents knew the fight was about to end. The two-handed falling avalanche delivered by Vader was one of the most fearsome attacks in lightsaber combat. The combination of cybernetic strength, dark side energy, and perfect technique created strikes that could shatter blast doors, buckle starship hulls, and absolutely obliterate defensive positions. No one survived being on the receiving end of Vader's full power strikes. No one. His duel with his son aboard the second Death Star showcased the full evolution of his style. When Luke attacked aggressively, attempting to overwhelm his father through speed and determination, Vader responded with modified Form V's. His counterattacks delivered with just enough force to turn Luke's aggression against him. Vader wasn't trying to kill Luke. He was trying to break him psychologically, to demonstrate that resistance was hopeless, to force Luke to accept that joining the Sith was his only option. But Luke, through his own connection to the light side of the Force, through his refusal to give in to fear or anger, found a way to endure. And when Vader made the mistake of taunting Luke about his sister, When he threatened to corrupt Leia, as he had tried to corrupt Luke, something broke in the young Jedi. Luke embraced Form V's aggressive potential in a way he never had before, his strikes coming with Vader-level power, his technique perfect. For a brief moment, Luke became what Anakin had been, the perfect Form V practitioner using every ounce of strength and skill to overcome a seemingly unbeatable opponent. Vader's defenses, which had withstood everything Luke had thrown at him up to that point, began to crack. Luke's falling avalanche struck again and again. His fluid riposts turned every one of Vader's counter-attempts into new vulnerabilities. Within moments, Vader found himself on the defensive, being driven back, his mechanical body unable to keep pace with his son's furious assault. When Luke finally disarmed him, severing his hand, Vader lay defeated, his lightsaber rolling away, his breathing labored. The duel demonstrated something crucial. Form V, when wielded with sufficient passion and power, could overcome even its most perfect practitioner. Luke's victory proved that Vader's evolution of the form, while formidable, wasn't unbeatable. It also showed the terrible danger of Form V's aggressive philosophy. In that moment of triumph, standing over his defeated father, Luke looked at his mechanical hand and saw it mirrored in Vader's severed prosthetic. He saw how close he had come to becoming exactly what he fought against. But Luke's choice in that moment, his decision to spare his father, to throw away his lightsaber rather than strike the killing blow, revealed something about Form 5 that often gets overlooked in discussions of its aggressive nature. The form is a tool. Its philosophy of power and dominance can serve the light just as easily as the dark. What matters is the practitioner's intent, their understanding of why they fight, their commitment to principles beyond merely winning. Vader's evolution of Form V represented the culmination of one path, the dark path, where power becomes an end in itself. But Luke's use of Form V in that same duel represented another path, where power serves compassion, where strength protects rather than dominates, where aggressive technique serves defensive purpose. Both were Form V. Both were legitimate expressions of its philosophy. The difference was the heart of the practitioner. The Skywalker legacy dominates discussions of Form V, and rightfully so. Few practitioners in galactic history matched their mastery or impact. But focusing solely on Anakin, Vader, and Luke risks overlooking other remarkable warriors who wielded Form 5 with distinction, each bringing their own innovations and insights to the form's practice. Perhaps no practitioner outside the Skywalker line deserves more recognition than Ahsoka Tano. As Anakin's Padawan, Ahsoka learned Form VV from one of its greatest masters. But she didn't simply copy her master's approach. She adapted it, transforming Form 5 to suit her unique circumstances and fighting style. Ahsoka was smaller and lighter than most Form V practitioners. She couldn't rely on pure physical strength the way Anakin could. She also favored dual wielding, using two lightsabers instead of the single blade most Form V users preferred. These factors led Ahsoka to focus primarily on Shien rather than Djem So. The Shien variant's emphasis on deflecting multiple threats suited her tactical situation better than Djem So's single opponent focus. More significantly, Ahsoka adopted the reverse grip technique, holding one of her lightsabers with the blade extending backward along her forearm. This controversial grip, viewed by many traditionalists as archaic and inefficient, became Ahsoka's signature. The reverse grip provided several advantages for her fighting style. It created unusual angles for both attack and defense, making her movements harder to predict and counter. It allowed her to protect her body while maintaining offensive capability, compensating for her smaller frame. And when combined with her standard grip lightsaber, it created a defensive coverage that could handle threats from virtually any direction simultaneously. Ahsoka's approach to the barrier of blades showcased her innovation. Traditional Shien practitioners created the barrier through wide, powerful sweeps of a single blade. Ahsoka, with two blades at different angles, could create a more complex defensive pattern. Her reverse grip blade covered high and close angles, while her standard grip blade handled low and distant threats. The result was a barrier even more difficult to penetrate than the classical version, perfectly suited for protecting herself and others in the chaotic battlefields of the Clone Wars. Her mastery became evident during the Siege of Mandalore, one of the final engagements of the Clone Wars. Facing overwhelming numbers of Mandalorian warriors loyal to Darth Maul, Ahsoka used Shien to devastating effect. She deflected blaster fire from dozens of opponents simultaneously while advancing steadily, using Shien deflection to close distance rapidly. Her dual wielding created such a dense web of defensive coverage that clone troopers could advance behind her with confidence, knowing her blades protected them from the storm of incoming fire. When she finally confronted Maul himself, Ahsoka demonstrated that Shien could hold its own, even against master-level opponents using other forms. While she didn't match Maul's raw power or experience, her Form V foundation provided the defensive solidity she needed to endure his assault while looking for opportunities to counter. The duel proved that Form V's principles, properly applied by a skilled practitioner, could contend with any combat style. Luke Skywalker's journey with Form 5 tells a different story. Unlike Anakin, who received formal Jedi training in the form, or Ahsoka, who learned directly from a Form V master, Luke discovered the style through combat necessity and observation. During his first confrontation with Vader on Cloud City, Luke attempted to use what little training Yoda and Obi-Wan had given him. It wasn't enough. Vader's mastery of Form V overwhelmed Luke's defenses, and the duel ended with Luke's hand severed, his spirit shaken. But Luke studied that defeat. He analyzed every moment of the duel, understanding how Vader had dismantled his defenses, how Form V's counterattacking philosophy had turned his every attack into a vulnerability. When Luke returned to face Vader on the Death Star, he had learned. He mirrored Vader's technique, using Form V's principles not because anyone had taught him the formal structure, but because he understood, through observation and experience, what worked against his father's style. This organic discovery of Form V's principles represents something important about the form itself. Unlike some of the more technical forms, Form V's core concepts are almost intuitive. Block an attack and immediately strike back. Use powerful strikes to overwhelm defenses. Persevere until you create an opening. These aren't obscure techniques requiring decades of study. They're fundamental combat principles that any warrior might discover through experience. Form V's genius lies in systematizing these principles, refining them through practice, and creating a coherent framework for applying them consistently. Luke's eventual victory over Vader showcased Form V's effectiveness when wielded with complete commitment. The flurry of strikes he delivered in the duel's final moments represented Form 5 at its most aggressive, each blow building on the last, each technique flowing seamlessly into the next. For those brief seconds, Luke became what Anakin had been, pure power channeled through perfect technique. Then he stopped, making the choice Anakin never could, proving that mastery of Form 5 didn't require abandoning compassion or wisdom. In the years following the Empire's fall, Luke would refine his understanding of Form 5 as he established his new Jedi Order. He recognized both its tremendous value and its inherent risks. Luke taught Form 5 to his students, but always emphasized the importance of balancing aggression with compassion, of understanding that power without wisdom leads to tyranny. His approach to Form 5 instruction reflected the hard-won lessons of his journey, the understanding that comes only from having walked the edge between light and darkness and consciously chosen the light. General Grievous presents an interesting case study in Form V's effectiveness. Grievous wasn't force-sensitive. He was a cyborg, a Kaleesh warrior enhanced with droid components and trained in lightsaber combat by Count Dooku. Dooku taught Grievous elements of multiple forms, including Form V. While Grievous couldn't channel the Force to augment his strikes or enhance his reflexes, His mechanical body provided its own advantages. Grievous's multiple arms allowed him to wield up to 4 lightsabers simultaneously, creating an overwhelming offensive presence that pure Form V couldn't match. But when he employed Form V principles with single blade work, focusing on powerful strikes and aggressive counterattacks, he proved remarkably effective. His lack of force sensitivity should have been crippling when facing Jedi, but his understanding of Form V technique, combined with his mechanical strength and speed, made him one of the most feared opponents the Jedi faced during the Clone Wars. Grievous demonstrated that Form V's principles could be applied even without Force connection, though obviously the results were less potent than when wielded by a true Force user. His success also highlighted Form V's fundamental soundness as a combat system. The techniques worked because they were based on solid tactical principles, not just mystical force powers. Among the Sith, beyond Vader, Form V saw significant use. Darth Bane's mastery has already been discussed, but his legacy continued through the rule of 2. Each Sith master trained their apprentice in combat, and Form V's effectiveness ensured it remained part of Sith martial training. Some Sith favored Form 7's more overtly aggressive approach, but others recognized that Form V's controlled power served them better than Chuyo's chaos. The key difference between Jedi and Sith applications of Form 5 lay not in technique, but in intent and the emotional fuel behind the techniques. Jedi using Form V drew on the Force through serenity and focus, channeling power through discipline. Sith drew on anger, hatred, and aggressive emotion, these darker feelings fueling their strikes with additional intensity. Both approaches could be devastatingly effective. Both could execute the same techniques with precision and power. The difference showed in the practitioner's stability, their ability to maintain control, their likelihood of making mistakes driven by emotion, rather than tactical necessity. Throughout all these various practitioners, certain patterns emerge. Form Phi attracted those comfortable with direct confrontation, with facing opposition head-on rather than seeking to avoid or redirect it. It suited larger, stronger individuals naturally, though smaller practitioners like Even Peel and Ahsoka Tano proved that size mattered far less than commitment and proper technique. It appealed to competitive personalities, to warriors who enjoyed the challenge of combat, and took satisfaction in victory earned through skill and determination. Yet Form 5 also demanded maturity. The practitioners who mastered it most completely were those who understood that power without wisdom is mere brutality, that strength serves best when exercised with purpose, that dominating an opponent means controlling yourself first. This understanding separated true masters from merely skilled practitioners. Anyone with sufficient training could learn Form V's techniques. Only those with proper temperament and philosophy could wield them as they were meant to be wielded. The philosophy of power, understanding Form V's deeper principles. Combat forms aren't just collections of techniques. They're philosophies made physical, worldviews expressed through blade work. Each form reveals something about how its practitioners view conflict, opposition, and the proper role of power in resolving disputes. To truly understand Form V'i, we must look beyond its techniques to the philosophical foundations that give those techniques meaning and purpose. At its core, Form 5 rests on a fundamental principle. Conflict is inevitable, and when it comes, victory serves justice better than stalemate. This distinguishes Form 5 from more defensive forms like Soresu, which emphasize that outlasting an opponent is itself a form of victory. Form 5 practitioners don't believe in moral victory through endurance. They believe that when you face opposition, when combat becomes necessary, you should end it decisively and quickly. Prolonged conflict causes more harm than swift resolution, even if that resolution comes through overwhelming force. This principle makes some Jedi uncomfortable. It smacks of Might makes right philosophy, the dangerous idea that power itself determines correctness. But Form V's defenders argue this misunderstands the form's philosophy. Form V doesn't claim that power makes something right. It claims that when right has been established, when the moral position is clear, power should be applied decisively to enforce it. A Jedi knows droids attacking civilians is wrong. Form V says the proper response is to stop the droids immediately and completely, not to engage in prolonged combat that risks innocent casualties, while the Jedi displays defensive prowess. The form's emphasis on controlled aggression generates similar debates. Aggression, in Jedi philosophy, traditionally is viewed with suspicion. The path to the dark side runs through anger, aggression, and fear. Yet Form 5 requires practitioners to engage their aggressive instincts, to channel competitive drive and desire for victory into combat effectiveness. How can this be reconciled with Jedi teachings about emotional control? Form V masters distinguish between aggressive emotion and aggressive action. Feeling aggressive, letting anger or hatred fuel your strikes, represents the dark path. Acting aggressively, executing techniques designed to overwhelm opposition, doesn't require dark emotions at all. A surgeon cutting away diseased tissue acts aggressively to help the patient. A firefighter using explosives to create fire breaks acts aggressively to protect homes. Aggressive action in service to defensive purpose isn't contradiction, it's pragmatism. This distinction requires significant emotional maturity to maintain. It's easy to slide from aggressive action to aggressive emotion, especially in the heat of combat. Form V practitioners must constantly monitor their internal state, ensuring their techniques flow from tactical necessity rather than anger or hatred. This makes Form V training as much about self-awareness as physical technique. Masters test their students' emotional control repeatedly, putting them in situations designed to provoke anger, frustration, or fear, then observing whether those emotions compromise their technique. The emotional challenges of Form V explain why most Jedi weren't taught the form until later in their training. Young Padawans, still developing emotional regulation skills, weren't ready to handle Form V's demands. They needed the foundation provided by more straightforward forms first. Only once a Padawan demonstrated sufficient emotional maturity would most masters introduce Form V training. Even then, constant vigilance was required to ensure the student didn't develop unhealthy patterns. Anakin Skywalker's fall illustrates what happens when this vigilance fails. His natural affinity for Form 5 meant he progressed rapidly in technical skill, but his emotional development didn't keep pace. He never fully internalized the distinction between aggressive action and aggressive emotion. When stressed, when afraid, when angry, those emotions bled into his combat technique. Form V became a channel for his darker impulses, rather than a tool disciplined by wisdom. Form V's reputation was inextricably linked with the Empire's terror. Luke's public use of Form V during the New Republic era began a slow rehabilitation of the form's image. When people saw Luke Skywalker, hero of the rebellion, using similar techniques to Vader, but in service to justice and peace, they began to understand that Form 5 itself wasn't evil. The form was a tool. Like any tool, it could be used for good or ill, depending on the wielder's intent. This distinction proved crucial for the form's survival in popular consciousness. In academic circles, Form 5 generates ongoing debate about the relationship between combat technique and philosophy. Some scholars argue that certain forms naturally align with light or dark side principles. They claim Form V's aggressive nature inevitably leads practitioners toward the dark side, citing Anakin's fall as evidence. Others counter that Luke's successful use of Form V proves the form is philosophically neutral, that any style can serve either light or darkness, depending on the practitioner. This debate misses a crucial point. Forms aren't neutral, but neither are they deterministic. Form V's philosophy does emphasize certain values: power, dominance, perseverance, aggressive action. These values can serve the light when coupled with wisdom and compassion, when strength protects rather than oppresses, when dominance means controlling situations to minimize harm rather than controlling others for personal gain. Or these same values can serve darkness when divorced from ethical constraints, when power becomes an end in itself, when dominance means trampling others underfoot. The form doesn't determine the outcome. The practitioner does. But the form isn't irrelevant either. Different forms cultivate different psychological patterns. Spending years training in Form V, internalizing its principles, does shape how a practitioner thinks about conflict and power. This isn't deterministic, but it's real. Someone wanting to cultivate patience and defensive thinking might find Form 3 more aligned with their goals. Someone wanting to develop decisive offensive capability will naturally gravitate toward Form V. The question isn't whether Form V leads to darkness. The question is whether a particular practitioner, given their circumstances, temperament, and level of emotional maturity, can handle Form V's demands responsibly. Some can, some can't. Identifying which category a student falls into represents one of the greatest challenges facing any teacher of the form. Looking forward, Form V's place in Force user training seems secure. Its effectiveness ensures continued study and practice. Its association with legendary figures like Vader, Luke, and Ahsoka guarantees ongoing interest. But perhaps most importantly, the fundamental human experiences Form V addresses, the questions it raises about power, aggression, and control, these remain eternally relevant. As long as Force users face conflicts, as long as they must balance compassion with decisive action, Form V will offer valuable lessons. The way of the Krayt Dragon endures, not because it's the strongest form or the most perfect form. It endures because it asks practitioners to grapple with perhaps the most difficult question any warrior faces. How do you wield great power responsibly? How do you embrace strength without becoming brutal? How do you act decisively without becoming tyrannical? How do you persevere without becoming inflexible? Form V doesn't provide easy answers to these questions, but it provides a framework for exploring them, for testing yourself against them, for developing the wisdom to navigate between the extremes. In the end, Form V's greatest lesson might be this: power is inevitable. Force users will always possess abilities beyond normal beings. The question isn't whether to be powerful. The question is what to do with that power. Form V says to use it, directly and decisively, in service to justice and peace. To stand between innocence and threats, lightsaber blazing, turning back aggression with superior force. To persevere when others would falter, to create openings when others would wait, to dominate situations not through cruelty, but through overwhelming capability directed by wisdom. This is the way of the Krayt Dragon. This is Form V's, a fighting style that acknowledges the reality of power, while insisting that power serve purpose beyond itself, a philosophy that embraces aggression while channeling it toward protection, a tradition that demands the very best from its practitioners, requiring not just technical skill but emotional maturity and moral clarity. For those who can meet these demands, who can wield Form V's devastating techniques while maintaining their connection to the light, the form offers something precious. It offers the ability to stand firm when darkness threatens, to protect with unwavering strength, to be the immovable obstacle between evil and innocent. It offers the power to make a difference when difference must be made. It offers the perseverance to see justice done, even when justice seems impossible. This is why Anakin Skywalker was drawn to Form V, why he perfected it to levels rarely seen, why Darth Vader continued to use it even after his fall, why Luke Skywalker reclaimed it as a tool for the light, why Ahsoka Tano made it her own, why countless Jedi and Sith throughout the millennia found in its techniques something that resonated with their deepest understanding of what it means to fight, to struggle, to overcome. Form V endures because conflict endures, because injustice endures, because the need for those willing to stand against darkness with overwhelming force guided by wisdom endures. As long as these needs exist, as long as beings must choose between standing firm or falling back, the way of the Krayt Dragon will find practitioners ready to walk its demanding path. May the Force guide any who undertake this journey. May they find in Form 5 not just techniques for combat, but wisdom for life. May they learn to wield power without being corrupted by it. And may they understand that strength without compassion is tyranny, but compassion without strength is merely good intentions, swept aside by those willing to use force for darker purposes. The legacy of Form V, written across thousands of years and countless battles, tells us that there is a middle path, a way to be strong without being cruel, a way to act decisively without losing wisdom, a way to embrace the Krayt Dragon's power while serving the light. This is the challenge Form V offers. This is the promise it holds for those who master it completely. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Form V, the Djem So and Shien variants that define some of the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever known. If you enjoyed this exploration of Sith and Jedi combat techniques, please like this video and subscribe to the Sith Lore channel for more comprehensive deep dives into the dark side of the Force and the warriors who wielded it. Leave a comment below telling me which other lightsaber form you'd like me to cover next, or what aspect of Sith history you'd most like to explore. Until next time, may your blade never falter, and may your perseverance lead to victory.